we're likely to lose another 250,000 people dead between now and January. You hear me? Because people aren't paying attention.
We got Sleepy Joe Biden echoing warnings from public health experts about the U.S. coronavirus death toll, driving more fear and anxiety among Americans. This after the so-called president-elect announced some of the first mandates he'll demand we follow. Watch.
On the first day I'm inaugurated to say I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days. And I think we'll see a significant reduction if we occur that, if that occurs with vaccinations and masking to drive down the numbers considerably.
Because we haven't been masking already? Is that really the plan, Mr. Biden? Wear a mask, close your business, cancel everything, stay home. We've turned the corner, my friends. If we don't stand up to this government overreach now, we're not going to get the chance to do so again until the damage is fully done. Joining me now is someone who's been very outspoken on this over the past few months, Alex Berenson, former New York Times reporter and author of the hit online, Unreported Truths about COVID-19 and lockdowns. All right, Alex, let's just jump into this because I'm not a doctor, don't play one on TV. But I do know that I live in New York City and we've been masking and had all these rules and regulations in place for months. And now they're telling us we need to do more of that while the cases are surging in major urban areas across the country. If this stuff works, why isn't it working?
Well, I think that's a great question. The answer is that it doesn't really work. Nothing really works very well except being the right time of year and sort of being outside and not being forced to be inside a lot. There's considerable evidence that masks really don't protect the wearer at all. And now we have a new big study out of Denmark that was very well designed and done that essentially proved that beyond any doubt. Masks do not protect the wearer from coronavirus. I'm not talking about N95 respirators when they're properly worn. I'm talking about the masks that most people wear every day and that are sort of realistic to expect people to wear. And then this question of source control, whether or not my mask protects you, as you've heard, that turns out to be probably nonsense too. The reasons are sort of technical, and I go into them in the booklet. But the fact is that the masks are they're not able to filter out particles that are small enough to make much of a difference. The viral particle itself is too small, and what are called aerosol particles, which contain a lot of the virus that does transmit the COVID, are also too small for most masks to filter out. So those don't work. Lockdowns, maybe they work temporarily. It's not really clear, but it is also what is very clear is that if you lock down hard and then you eventually you have to have society back, you have to let up on the lockdown. Eventually the virus comes back. Europe saw that very, very clearly this fall. All these people who are telling us all these important things we need to do back in July and August, they were telling us what a great job Europe had done. Europe had suppressed this virus and we hadn't. France, Italy, they'd done the right things. They'd contact trace, they'd locked down for months. Finally, they'd begun to let up. Well, guess what? France, Italy, Spain, the UK, and really all of Europe have had terrible outbreaks or, very large outbreaks this fall. And, because when you lock down, you just delay the virus from spreading, widely enough that we get to herd immunity or something close to it. Now, here's one thing that might actually work. Okay. I follow the science. I do my best to follow the science. The early vaccine data looks very promising. And that's a good thing. We should be happy about that. I'm not saying we should all run out to take this vaccine right now. I think we need to see safety data. And I think for people who are in low risk categories, there's no real urgency to do this. But when we're talking about people who are at, really high risk, really elderly people with severe comorbidities, this vaccine, these vaccines, they might do some good. But the fact is, whatever we do or don't do, and let's hope vaccines can sort of take get us to a better place, in the relatively near future. This vaccine, so many people in the United States have now gotten COVID or gotten SARS-CoV-2 and recovered from it, that it looks like I think we are closer to the end of this than the beginning, no matter what we do. There's a plausible case to be made that more than 100 million Americans, almost a third of the country, have already gotten this. So Alex, this idea that sorry.
That's okay. No, go ahead. Finish your point. The idea that
this idea that there's just terrible, terrible days ahead. If a third of the country's already been past this, then we're closer to the end of this than the beginning, with or without a vaccine.
Now, the CDC director, masks is something that's near and dear to my heart because I have to wear them on the treadmill. I have to wear them when I walk through my lobby in New York. I hate this. I think this is absurd. I see people when I get into taxis pull their mask up after it's been down for, I don't know, the last 2 hours or the last 30 minutes or whatever it is when they're starting their shift. So we can all see that this is an imperfect science at best. When the CDC director says that the science is settled on this, and I'm asking you this honestly, what is he talking about? Where is the science that settles that this, because anyone just observing, not even pretending to be a scientist, looking around would say that these policies of social distancing and masking have not in any way been worth the cost and the irritation. So is there science? Is there data that we can all read and look at to at least see what the CDC director is talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at what they're talking about that supports their case. It's very weak, okay? And to get into why, let me give you an example that I use in the booklet, okay? What you want are what are called randomized controlled trials. That's where you take a large group of people, you split them into, usually two categories. You give one category a drug and you give the other category a placebo. And then at the end, whether it's a month or 6 months or a year, however long, you see if something's changed. So that's why if you go to the doctor and you have high cholesterol, that doctor is going to say, hey, you should take a statin, because there's really good evidence that statins will lower your cholesterol and probably reduce the risk of your heart attack, you having a heart attack or a stroke. Okay, they've done this work, so they know. There is nothing like that showing that masks do any good, essentially. And in fact, again, when you go back to this Danish trial, it shows the opposite. It shows that masks don't really work. So what do they have? What do these people who say masks work have? They have a bunch of stuff from laboratories showing that masks, when they're properly fitted, seem to slow the spread of somewhat large particles in human breath. And they have what are called observational studies. And one they always come back to is, well, there were these two hairdressers in Missouri who had COVID, and they had 139 patients, and they wore masks, and 139 clients, and all those clients wore masks, and nobody got COVID. Okay, that sounds good. Here's the problem. We don't know whether maybe that hair salon had really good ventilation. We don't know whether those two hairdressers just happened to be careful, whether they happened not to be very infectious for some reason. We don't know. That's why we have to do really good clinical trials. In medicine, the ultimate line is first, do no harm. And medicine learned this the hard way for about a millennia, when they bloodlet and they used leeches and they put holes in people's heads, and terrible, terrible, ideas were tried, and they were never really tested in a thorough way, and they became part of the culture of medicine. And in the last 150 years, medicine has gone away from that, and they've gone to this idea of, we need clinical trials. We need really to test things. And suddenly with COVID, that's out the window. And that's why, look, I'm not a scientist, although I covered the drug industry for the New York Times for a long time, and I've written a lot about science and medicine over the last 20 years. But there are very good scientists out there who just think what we're doing right now is a huge mistake and is going to have long-term impacts on science, because we're going back to this idea of, oh, it sounds good, and here's 3 people out there who would seem to work for, so everybody's got to do it now. That's
Before
a mistake.
Before we let you go, Alex, I've got to ask you, the Great Barrington Declaration, I mean, I signed it, so my name is there online. I'm sure you signed it too. Aren't those scientists? Why do we always hear, listen to the scientists, and then there are these scientists, you're bringing up some of them now, who don't agree with lockdowns as a policy because of all the things we know about keeping children out of school, drug abuse, suicide, addiction, obesity, all these things that it worsens. Do they not count as scientists? I don't understand.
Well, I mean, they're actually very, very good scientists. And in many cases, they're not conservative. A lot of these people are quite progressive and are just worried about the societal effect of lockdowns and how poor people are getting hit harder. That's a media problem, okay? That's a problem of, we're not going to explain to you that there's real dissension in the scientific community about this. We're just going to tell you what Tony Fauci says, and the fact that these people from Harvard and Oxford and Stanford and lots of other places disagree. We don't care. It doesn't count.
Gotta ask you this before we let you go, Alex. Would you, if you were advising an incoming administration, would you tell them to fire Dr. Fauci at this point?
I would, but he didn't just not get fired. He's getting promoted. He's going to run the whole show.
A classic bureaucrat, but you would fire him, so would I. Alex, good luck on the book. Thanks so much for all your work on this, and we'll be out there in the battles. I'll see you.
Thanks, Buck.
Hey, Team Buck, just want to say thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more great content from The First, please click that subscribe button.